Hello, here's Kramer's Corner with a technical update on the equities markets, European and US indices and MAX 7. Let's kick off then, but I have to say first, this video is for educational purpose only. There's no recommendation or advice whatsoever intended. It's purely to demonstrate how to try to read the market and how to teach you guys to use the charts using technical analysis. All right, let's start with Europe this time, and EUROSTOXX 50 massive move we had here on 8th of April after the ceasefire announcement. Paused a little bit yesterday, but today it seems to be pushing higher. That will be key towards where it will close. It is currently trying to eating itself into this gap area here, 5,937 resistance, and the key up here 5,986. Currently it is in it, but it's also lower part of cloud, and RSI is at the moment as we speak, as we can see, just above 60 threshold. So closing today could be key. If it closes below the resistance and below the 60 threshold, then we could see a little bit of a setback. But look at this. We have 100 moving average turning around, starting to push higher, and the 55 also turning around. So it seems like we are changing the landscape totally. Also here we can see on the weekly, we actually had a bottom and reversal pattern, massive bearish candle. We had a kind of a doji-like, little bit larger body than I would normally like, and then a bullish candle yesterday, and it seems like we are pushing higher here. Also the on the RSI, never closed below 40 threshold, could turn around, and that could be another spring summer rally we could be facing. On the DAX index, well, not as much bullish as the EUROSTOXX 50. Yes, it was above this gap here. Now it's trying to push into the next one, but it is being stopped here by the 55 coming down, the 100 and also the 200. So it's lacking a little bit. Also RSI below 60 threshold, and here we are below 40, so we're still a negative sentiment. But if the other markets also push higher, DAX will be dragged with it. But it has really some serious resistance in the area here around 24,240 in this area. Really some serious resistance. Can it get above that? Well, then there's potential up to this area here, 24,650, and then what can then happen? Let's have a look at the US markets then. Nasdaq 100 that jumped higher here on the 8th and kept it going on yesterday's session. RSI actually closed just above the 60 threshold yesterday, so that could be key for the future. 200 moving average coming up there. That's the daily moving average. So giving some support. 55 turning around, and that is something to keep an eye on. Let's have a look at what's going on here on the pre-market. Just a little tad testing the upper part of the cloud. RSI above 60 threshold here on the future. Resistance around 25,465. If it gets up there, we could see a little bit of a setback, but it seems like we are really in establishing a bullish trend. However, I wouldn't be too surprised to see it sitting back today, not because it's technical analysis as such, but it's also there's a weekend, a lot of stuff can happen in the Middle East, a lot of announcement, a lot of statements flying around and maybe the market will say, all right, we'll take some profit home here before, and then we'll continue on Monday. S&P 500 also jumped and is just below the cloud here, and the minor resistance there at 6,845, but look at this, also closed above the 60 threshold, actually with a larger margin than Nasdaq 100. So if it doesn't start sliding back and moving into this gap it created here on the 8th of April, well, then it seems like we are turning around, really strong push higher. So that would be key here next few days. Can it get back above the cloud, and can it get back above this 6,845, 6,886 resistance area. I could imagine again a little bit of a pause and then the next push higher. It seems like the market participants are getting a little bit less worried about the oil, and we are not as dependent on it as we used to be, only for inflationary objectives. So let's have a look at pre-market, basically unchanged. So that's why I could imagine we will have a bit of a setback. Then I will move on to just talk about Max 7, but first of all, I will show you the semiconductor or the SOXX index illustrated by the ETF. Jumped also higher there on the 8th and continued yesterday. Bullish trend, positive sentiment. We were warned a little bit on the 7th where it actually closed above this resistance here, but we were not. Excuse me, it wasn't confirmed with our side, didn't close above 60 threshold, and we were still below the cloud, but that jump there was massive. But that was by no means helped by Nvidia. Nvidia, well, it did jump higher, but it's still below the cloud, still negative sentiment, and it's not Nvidia. Of course, it helps a lot because when it moves up by a couple of percent, 2-3%, then it will lift the entire market. But it was other companies, semiconductors. There are too many to mention, but be aware some of them are still a little bit underwater, to say the least. But one of them that really has pushed higher was Intel. As you can see, a massive move, and there's potential higher. I have some targets here saying 63, we're very close to that, and 73, and strong bullish trend supported by the positive RSI. Massive move on Intel. But let's have a look at some of the other Max, so-called Max 7. I know through the Intel in the mix, and that's not really a Max 7. However, Alphabet, just as a follow-up from a few days ago when we talked about Magnificent 7, they're not so magnificent anymore, and some of them still aren't. So here we have Google. I said that was one of the ones that had potential to push higher, and that also jumped and trading just lower part of the cloud, but above the 55 and 100 moving average. The latter one here, 100, is rising, supporting a positive sentiment on the RSI, supporting higher levels on Google. This is the Google C share, and could push higher as long as it stays above the lows here from yesterday. And if one has to trade this, and again, it's not a recommendation to buy or sell or anything, but my stop would be the lows from yesterday. If it takes out that, well, then we could slide back. But looking at the weekly, we can see how strong this 270-71 support area was. That's where we bounced from, and that means we could see higher levels on Google CCR in the coming weeks and possibly months. Apple also bounced a little bit, but is still a little bit under pressure here. Below the cloud, got rejected there. Bounced again. We'll have another go at it. We have the 100 moving average coming down, kind of putting a lid on it. So it could still be trading sideways here. And look at this. If we are having this, it's just around this 262 to 262 area, 262 and a half. Really strong resistance. We also went with 100 moving average coming down. So we have a clash here with 55 turning up and 200 also rising. We need the RSI to close above 60 threshold, and I think if we get a close above 262 and a half, we could have an uptrend established, but it's still a little bit fragile and uncertain. However, here on the weekly, we'll see where it bounced. It didn't even get down to the 243 here. Still positive sentiment on the RSI, and actually there's no divergence. So what I would do here on the weekly, I will draw a trend line here on this, and we are very close to test it here. So if it breaks above and closes above the trend line, then there's a good chance that it will push higher. Again, it's not a given, but if it gets back above 60 threshold, that would be even further confirmation. Amazon, that has really taken off after the jump here on the 8th. I mean, it got above this 220 there, and then it's okay, maybe it can't do that, will it slide back? But then yesterday it closed this gap there, this massive gap that was so important, and it closed above 233, that was key. And RSI also closed above 60 threshold. Did it already on the 8th of April with this candle here, but it was a little bit fragile. But boy, did it really support the bullish trend there, or confirm the bullish trend. And there could be much more in store for Amazon in the coming days and weeks towards 250. At least it should. But let's see what it will do here. Pre-market, it is trading just a tad up. Microsoft, on the other hand, still struggling. Yeah, it jumped a little bit open, but then sellers came in and said, yeah, no, we'll just dump it again. And we are back below this little resistance line there. So it was really, couldn't really do anything. And it could, again, slide back low. It really needs to take out the peak of that at 385 where it opened. So you can see it opened at the same price within 2 cents of the high. So sellers just took control, and I think that's just the name of the game at the moment for Microsoft. Of course, it can be lifted by the entire market, but there's a risk to the downside to push even further, maybe down to the 344, 45 lows we have been talking about. Meta Platforms, also former Facebook, well, it got above this gap there, and with a bullish candle. Still not positive sentiment on the RSI, but if it pushes higher and closes higher today, and we can see here pre-market, it is actually indicated at 629, so it's not that much, but still a little bit. Then we could get a close above 60 threshold, confirming bullish trend, but there's some strong overhead resistance up here in the region around 672, 73, really strong, also with the upper part of cloud. So that can be a little bit of a struggle. We also have 200 moving average coming down, but that was a massive bounce. And so keep an eye on that one. Finally, let's have a look at Tesla. Well, it's not popular at the moment to say. I think we will see it sliding lower to 325 area, possibly, but then we have the 100 weekly moving average giving some support, but the negative sentiment also here, a little bit divergence. And pre-market 345 and a half, basically where it closed yesterday, so not much out there. It is not the flavor of the month at the moment. All right, that's all for today. Have a nice day and nice weekend again there, and keep charting out there.